Welcome to the Steroids Podcast with your host, Dan the Bodybuilder from Thailand. Boom! Boom! Let's get started here. The Steroids Podcast is brought to you by Ultimate Guide to ROIDS, 109-page ebook by Dan the Bodybuilder from Thailand. Now, for the first time in bodybuilding history, you have someone with no corporate interests and no obligation to please anyone, not walking on eggshells to not offend. Ultimate Guide to ROIDS gives you the information, the whole truth, not a full truth and a half truth, full truth. Ultimate Guide to ROIDS gives you the keys to the Lamborghini, gives you the information, and lets you decide what to do with it. It's a crime this information has been suppressed this long. Now let's get on with the podcast.
For the guys interested in the Steroids Podcast coaching services, there's the 1-hour phone call consultations. It's $59, and you call and have a private phone call with me. For the guys that have been listening to the podcast and have signed up to do that, and we've done that, it's been great getting to know you guys and happy to help you guys out. And then for the guys that are doing the daily text messaging based coaching, where we text message each other on WhatsApp, we talk about, it's personal training over WhatsApp, and we talk every day. That one's $99 a month, and then we get that daily contact between you and me. It's not just talking about only your cycle and taking care of side effects and keeping your gains going and stuff like that, but we also do training and diet together. So it's the full comprehensive service. All right, welcome back to another episode of the Steroids Podcast. The first question for today is from Varaya. He asked the question, here's a question I've had for a while. Do you know what's happening physiologically when a user gets back and shin pumps on cycle? I used to think it was from water retention from Dbol expanding tissues and pressing on nerves, but the same pain can occur while on T-ball as well, which, as you know, is a dry oral. So what is the source on this issue? Well, what you're noticing is that anabolics increase pumps in all muscles. So some muscles are more susceptible to this than others. So like the lower back is notorious for having pumps, especially from strong anabolic compounds. So really any strong steroid, though, can give you these pumps, like lower back pumps. People talk about that. And so just to describe what a lower back pump feels like for people that haven't experienced it before, it feels like the muscle in your lower back is going to explode. So it gets so full of blood with a pump, like after you've done deadlifts or after you've done bent over barbell rows or when you've done squats, and especially if you're on something like Dbol or Tren or Anadrol, or even Winstrol or Anavar can do it. You can get this really extreme pump in your lower back, and it can feel like there's so much pressure inside the muscles that it can feel like it's going to explode. And so it's sort of a sharp pain back there that makes you feel like you need to either get on your knees and bend over a bench in front of you to put pressure off of it, or like lie down or something. So it's really painful. It's not, when you talk about like an extreme lower back pump, it's not something that's fun. And so some people suggest like using supplements like to avoid this, like taurine is one that you hear frequently, but I personally haven't felt that is effective. Some people, it does work for them, but I've never noticed a difference from supplementing with taurine. And I mean, if that was the case, you should be able to take an energy drink, and have it go away. And we know that doesn't work. So what's happening is that the steroids cause these pumps all over the body. And if you have these normal muscles that usually aren't getting such an extreme pump, it can cause like that extreme pain. So there are other muscles too that will get extremely pumped sometimes, like your feet. Like there's a side effect called Winnie foot that is it's normal on Winstrol when you're running higher dosages of it, like 75 milligrams or 100 milligrams per day. It would be normal to be walking and to get a pump in the arch of your foot. and the pump could actually get so extreme when you're walking, especially if you're walking on an incline, like up a hill, where the arch of your foot, there's not a lot of room in there for a lot of extra blood. There is a muscle there holding the arch of your foot, but there's not a lot of room in there for an extra blood. So if it does get that signal and it does start getting a big pump, it can be extremely painful and make you actually have to stop walking for a little bit, like stop walking for 5 minutes and have to take a rest. I remember getting this at school a few times when I would walk up the hill to my school, and I would be using Winstrol, and I'd get an extreme pump in the arch of my foot, and it would get so painful that I'd have to, sit on a fire hydrant for 5 minutes and let it kind of dissipate and then start walking again, let the blood drain out of my foot. Other things that can cause pumps is like cramping. So especially clenbuterol. Clenbuterol causes cramping because it excites the muscles. It excites the central nervous system. So clenbuterol also makes you stronger. When you take the tablet, an hour later after taking the tablet, you're stronger. You'll be able to add like 1 or 2 reps to your max lifts that you could normally do. Like if you could normally do a 5-rep max with a certain weight, you'll be able to do it for like 6 or 7 reps simply because you took the clenbuterol an hour or so or 2 earlier, and then it makes your brain be able to send a stronger signal to your muscles to contract so they can work harder. And so it keeps your muscle tone, or the tension that is in your muscles, a little bit higher all the time, clenbuterol. And so it gives cramps, and you'll notice things like maybe like your tongue cramping a little bit, or your fingers cramping a little bit, or like the same thing, like your feet, like the arches in your feet. That's not uncommon. Some of these weird spots on your body cramping, like especially in your fingers and in your hands. That's pretty typical. Or like in your neck or under your jaw, in that area under your jawbone, below your chin, but in front of your neck. That area can definitely get cramps from clenbuterol. So when you use these performance-enhancing drugs, it is normal to get some of these pumps and cramps, and there's not really much you can do about it. The main thing to do is to make sure that your electrolyte balance is like level. That's the best thing you can do to avoid cramps. So having enough salt and having enough potassium and magnesium. If you just salt your food a little bit extra and you eat, at least 1 potato per day, because potato is, of common foods, that's the most potassium heavy food. 1 potato has about as much potassium as 3 bananas. And then, if you are not getting enough magnesium, if you just take a little bit of a magnesium supplement, like a magnesium tablet, usually if you take the full tablet, it'll give you diarrhea. So if you just crack it into 4 pieces and take a quarter tablet of magnesium per day, that's usually plenty of magnesium. So then you get those essential electrolytes. And then if you eat meat, you're getting enough calcium anyways. So that's the other electrolyte. But as far as like completely avoiding them, like, no, that's just kind of part of being on PEDs, is getting some like more extreme pumps. I'll tell you a few things. Usually if you're carbed up completely, you're a lot more likely to get these kind of extreme pumps. Also, Tren and orals give these extreme pumps more so than other steroids. Like other injectable steroids don't seem to give them as much as Trenbolone and orals do. And it seems like Anadrol and Dbol, these ones that carry like more water retention, they volumize the cell more and make more retention of glycogen, carbohydrate fuel storage inside the muscle cells, and so that they're storing, the cells are stretched more. They seem to be the ones that cause the worst pumps. But the diet is probably the most effective way for you to mitigate this. Generally, if you eat less carbs, the pumps, if you're getting debilitating pumps, then if you eat less carbs, generally it's not so much like that. And also just like a calorie surplus. If you're on a calorie surplus, the pumps seem to be a lot more extreme than if you're not on a calorie surplus. So those are the main ways to take care of it, is just making sure that your electrolytes are balanced, and then carbs and calorie surplus. being both things that make the pumps more extreme. So you can cut back on those. But, having those really extreme pumps like that, painful pumps, is a sign that you're really anabolic, gaining strength, gaining muscle. I remember during the first time that I ever used Winstrol, I remember it giving me a pump. I think I was using 2 tablets per day. I think I was using 50 milligrams per day. I think they were 25 milligram tablets. And I remember the pump in my forearms was so extreme and so rock hard that literally my forearm felt like a rock to the touch, because it was so full of blood that if you touched it, there was no give to the muscle. It was so swollen. And the veins, the little capillaries in my skin, actually started exploding during my workout. So I had these little exploded blood vessels like all over my forearms. There was like a definite, you looked at my arms and there was little red lines all over the place. I could see them during my workout. And that was my first time being on a Winstrol cycle, using Winstrol in my cycle. And so that was an example of the pumps. And here's another thing, is that when you are a new user of steroids and you haven't been using them for as long, you're more likely to have these extreme pump side effects. And then as you've been using them for longer, they become less common. But if you have been eating a lot of food and you are in a calorie surplus, they definitely do always happen. And they also are a sign that you're super anabolic and that you're, making muscle size and strength gains if you're getting these pumps. So that's the answer to that question. Next question is from Jacksino. Yes, for next steroid podcast, can you go more in depth about high dose Equipoise with medium dose testosterone? I heard about that from your friend from France, pro bodybuilder from France that we had on the show, but we had to take the episode off. And I'm curious about the results. Yeah, so mostly, if you can use testosterone, it's a good thing to use. People ask, why do you use higher dosage testosterone, or why use higher dose testosterone? So the first thing that I have to say is that most people that say, I don't use a high dose testosterone, I only use 250 milligrams per week or 500 milligrams per week, and then they have like an impressive physique, most of them are lying. So, they're saying that to you, but then they're in their bedroom, shooting up all kinds of syringes, and taking a lot of high dosages of tests. So a lot of guys that, have like crazy, large muscular dense physiques, and they're like, oh, I'm like on TRT and I add 40 milligrams of Anavar and that's my cycle. What they mean is that they're on 10 times TRT. So, one cc of testosterone, 250 milligrams per week testosterone, that's TRT, right? But, they're on a vial of testosterone a week. I mean, it's just simply not true. They're lying. Always trust your eyes, guys. If you see people that have physiques that don't look like a normal human being, or they don't look like a normal steroid user, or you've been using steroids for a couple years and you kind of know like what steroids do and have a feel for it at certain dosages, and you see people that are just completely in another like universe, like just trust your eyes. Like you will obviously know that this is not correct. This is not the effect of what they're doing. So not everybody is on 1 vial of testosterone per week, guys. That was kind of a joke when I said that, but it's to give you some perspective, because a lot of the big guys are on that much or more, depending on how big they are. And everybody has different cycle protocols, etc. But it does happen. It's not some crazy outlandish thing. And people talk to me quite a bit. Actually, they say like, oh, since I've been listening to your content, I've noticed that you're a fan of high testosterone cycles. And it's not really that I'm a fan of like really high dosage testosterone cycles. It's just that I'm honest with you about what I do when I'm alone in my bedroom. So, so a lot of these guys, that are saying like, I'm on TRT, I take 250 tests a week, or I take 500 tests a week, or something like that. And then they're like, oh, and then I complement that with SARMs or 40 milligrams of Anavar per day or something like that. It's just not true. They're saying that that's what they do, but then they're in their bedroom alone, at night shooting up hella syringes. And so even though they're telling you like, oh, I use this low dosage of testosterone, that's not actually what they're doing. And so that's what I'm trying to tell you is that, 1,000 milligrams of testosterone per week is not like a really high dosage. It's actually like a pretty normal dosage. It's just that people's perceptions are thrown off because, if you go on internet forums, you have all these guys that are saying like, don't take a high dosage of testosterone, which is anything more than 500 milligrams a week. And then you have, other guys on YouTube that are like IFBB pros and shit saying like, oh, I only take 500 milligrams per week and nothing more and stuff like that. But then, what these guys are doing, is trying to tell people, don't take any more than that because then you'll be as big as me and I want to be the biggest person. So, they tell you, it's like, do as I say, not as I do. And so you got to read between the lines on that. One, I usually don't recommend Dave Palumbo's material because he says a lot of stuff that is, not the greatest stuff and some of it's inaccurate. But other bits of it, if you read between the lines and you watch Dave Palumbo's show, there's quite a bit of true information in there. But you've definitely got to like be reading between the lines. And so one of the things that Dave Palumbo says, and this is a quote from Dave Palumbo, is every good steroid cycle starts with at least 1,000 milligrams of testosterone per week. Okay, that's what he recommends for a beginner's first cycle, is 1,000 milligrams of testosterone per week. That's his recommendation for a first beginner steroid cycle, okay? So that was a quote from him, and while I don't think that you need to use 1,000 milligrams of testosterone per week for your first beginner steroid cycle, I think it's better to use something like, 500 milligrams of testosterone per week with an oral, like Winstrol or Anavar or Dbol. That's my recommendation. But, it's what he's saying is true about, that's not some kind of insane dosage of testosterone, 1,000 milligrams per week, or like high testosterone. It's just normal. If you saw the guys, if you could see what they're doing in their bedrooms when they're alone and no one's looking, a lot of people are using around 1,000 milligrams of testosterone per week, and then they're just, saying that they use something else when they're talking to you. So that's, a lot of people have been asking me about, like, why do you recommend high testosterone dosage levels? Because, I use basically, like, if I'm going to do a cycle, I always use about 1,000 milligrams of testosterone per week, at least 700 and, up to 1,250 milligrams or, even up to 1,500 milligrams. Like if I'm really pushing it more with the testosterone, somewhere in that spectrum between 700 and 1,500 is what I use. And so people say, like, I notice you're a fan of super high dosage testosterone levels. And like, really, it's not that high. It's just normal. The guys who are really into high testosterone dosage is, 1 vial per week or more. Another example of this that is confirming that, what I'm saying about that, high testosterone dosage is generally, in reality, 1 vial per week or more would be when Dorian Yates, he gave an interview on a YouTube show called London Real. And in it, he talks about how he experimented with up to 3.5 grams of testosterone per week. And he said that at the time when he was experimenting with that back in the 80s, that was considered a lot. And that guys who were doing 2,500 milligrams or 1 vial of testosterone per week were usually the power lifters. That's a quote from Dorian Yates, okay? So he's talking about what guys were doing back in the 80s and what was considered a high testosterone dosage back in the 80s. So you got to like go look back through this to find out what really is a high testosterone dosage. And I'll tell you too that, higher testosterone dosage is higher than 1.5 grams per week. It does start to give side effects for a lot of people, like a high blood pressure, water retention, definitely noticing water retention in the skin outside the muscle. So think something like your sock when you remove your sock, having an indentation there, or laying on the bed on your stomach and noticing lines all over it when you get up. Once you start getting over 1,500 milligrams of testosterone per week, those side effects for most people do start coming on stronger. And, 1,000 milligrams of testosterone per week is a great dosage, and you can do a lot on that. But I'm saying this stuff because you guys have been listening to the podcast for a while, and, while I don't want to promote like high dosage usage to you guys, I do want to help you understand accurately what people actually do to achieve their physiques and what dosages they're actually using, what dosages, are considered normal, or what dosages people in the gyms that you see who are big are actually using, not what you've read on the internet or what somebody on the internet has told you is big or what is normal. But actually, in reality, when you go to the gym and you see people who are large, what they're using. So that's why I'm saying this to you guys. But not everybody does good on high test. And so, Jacksino was asking about Equipoise, and that's why we got off on this testosterone rant here, was because he was asking about using medium testosterone dosages with high doses of Equipoise. And so Equipoise is a steroid that it turns into estrogen a lot less than testosterone. If you got big estrogen problems with testosterone, or you get big bloating problems, or you get big acne problems, or mood issues with testosterone, using one of these other steroids instead can definitely be a less side effect option. Another reason why people use testosterone, as a high dosage thing is because it doesn't really have a lot of health side effects. You can usually take up to 1 gram of testosterone per week without really having any bad blood work if you keep your estrogen in check. It's also cheap for a high milligrams, and it's very effective. Like 1,000 milligrams of testosterone per week is pretty damn strong at building muscle and strength, and it's not very expensive compared to 1,000 milligrams of other steroids per week. So these are all reasons why people do that. But if you don't want to do that, and you just use 500 or 700 milligrams of testosterone per week, and then you can use, if you get side effects from testosterone, you can use other stuff like Equipoise, Deca, Durabolin, or the fast-acting ester of Deca called nandrolone phenylpropionate. It's similar to testosterone propionate. It kicks in a few days. And then there's also Primobolan. So Equipoise, Deca, Primobolan, those are like the 3 mass-building injectables that are common, other than testosterone, that you can use. Obviously Trenbolone as well. But Trenbolone is another high side effect drug. So I guess you would say that there's testosterone, then there's Primobolan, Deca, Equipoise, and Trenbolone. Those are the 5 injectables that most people are building their physiques around, or like their bases for their cycles that they build their physiques around. And, you can go with a lower testosterone dosage and then use a higher dosage of these other compounds if you don't like testosterone. And you can use those instead to get your milligrams in there, and you can grow muscle just fine. So, but just know that, most of them are not quite as strong as testosterone. So, 2 grams of testosterone is stronger than 2 grams of Equipoise or Primo or Deca. Not a lot stronger, but a little bit stronger. It's a little bit stronger. So if the main thing that you got to know is that most people who are big, jacked dudes, who you go and you see them at the gym and you say like, damn, that dude is jacked as fuck. The average dosage that these guys are running is somewhere between 1.5 to 2.5 or so grams of gear per week when they're on cycle. Somewhere between 1,500 milligrams up to around 2,500 milligrams of total steroids combined per week. So that means their testosterone, their Anavar, their Equipoise, their Primobolan, whatever they're doing their cycle with. If you added up the milligrams of all the different steroids that they're on, then, the total milligram dosage would be somewhere between 1,500 to 2,500 or so, in that range, milligrams per week. That's the common dosage that you're going to see. You're going to see people outside of those dosages, but those are going to be like outliers. Okay, so the majority of the concentration, if you made like a graph with dots with people, and what their dosages were, you're generally going to see them within that area. If they're the guys that you see at the gym and you say like, damn, that dude is jacked as fuck, that's going to be it. So if you don't like testosterone and you want to put more milligrams into getting in that range with other steroids, then that's fine. That's fine. But, a lot of other steroids do have some health side effects. They can affect your blood work bad. You got to check your own blood work to see, whether or not they do affect your health bad. But, normally testosterone does not affect your health badly. It's a bioidentical hormone. Your body knows exactly what to do with it. And then also a lot of these other ones are more expensive. So, even me, if I had an unlimited supply of Primobolan for free, all right, I would probably use 3 cc's or 4 cc's of testosterone per week, and I'd use like a gram or a gram and a half of Primobolan per week. That would be even my preference, but that's freaking expensive. Okay? So these are all different reasons of why, people do what they do. Hope that clears that up a little bit with going into high doses of Equipoise and what it does. Yeah, it grows muscle great. As long as you're getting into that 1.5 to 2.5 or 3 grams or so of total anabolic steroid milligrams per week. If you're using Equipoise, Primobolan, Deca, whatever, testosterone, and getting into that area, then that's going to be the sufficient amount of ROIDS that you're going to need to have flowing through you in order to be jacked as fuck. Okay, so next question is from For the Glory. Okay, well, I've suffered secondary hypogonadism for a while. It's basically inhibited normal growth and development. I used some natural stuff to help progress my test levels, but it just isn't cutting it. I was wondering, though, if I could use Primobolan or even low-dose Anavar, Winstrol, Equipoise instead of actual testosterone to avoid certain sides. I'm not prone to hair loss, but it is a fear, so I've considered Deca only too. Still interested in competing further and getting serious with fitness, so I'm looking for gains as well. Okay, so this guy, For the Glory, he sent me a picture of himself, and he's an adult. So even though he does have secondary hypogonadism and it inhibited some normal growth and development, that phase for him is over, and he has used some hormones and stuff. So he's not going to be like growing anymore. He's already an adult. Okay, but for guys that have, if you did have normal or hypogonadism, which is low testosterone, low hormone levels, and testicles that are not functioning fully, when you went through puberty and you have like a short penis or something like that, you can actually grow it. Or like you can actually grow like a couple inches, like possibly, an inch or two onto your height, or get some of that normal development, like some chest hair appearing, or like your penis growing to, what would be its normal length if you had some of those, if you would have had normal hormone levels during puberty. You can get some of those benefits still. If you did have low hormone levels during puberty and you missed that, and now you're an adult, and you're lacking some development. So if you do go on like testosterone replacement therapy, that can generally, it doesn't help guys' height very much because their bone plates are already fused, and so they can't grow much more, but it can help finish off some of that development. So like if they didn't have enough hormones, and so it caused their penis to be not growing as much as it should be, then going on the hormone replacement therapy can help it to be its normal size that it would have been if it would have had complete its development and complete some other development, like finishing off some like body hair and facial hair growth and stuff like that. But that's only if you started out not completing your development during puberty from having low hormone levels. So for guys, if they've had hypogonadism and they grew up with that during their teenage years and never completed development, hormone replacement therapy can still be something that you can go on and it can help you as an adult even to complete some of that development. So that's one thing with that. And now For the Glory is asking about using some anabolics, so hormones that are more on the muscle building and less on the masculinizing side, because he says he wants to avoid testosterone because of certain side effects like hair loss. So if you don't want to have masculinizing side effects or masculinizing effects from using hormones, then generally staying away from things like testosterone, Trenbolone, Masteron, things like that have a high stimulation of the male hormone receptor and have those really masculinizing effects. Generally staying away from those is fine. And so Deca without testosterone, it has been shown in studies to be able to give sufficient male hormone androgen replacement function. If you don't use it with testosterone, generally the metabolite of nandrolone, which is called dihydronandrolone, so with nandrolone, which is Deca, that's the chemical name for Deca is nandrolone, it interacts with an enzyme in the body called 5-alpha reductase. That's the enzyme that turns testosterone into dihydrotestosterone, which is the brain chemical, the brain steroid that works. It makes you have a masculinized brain, and the behavior components of steroids, and then makes you be able to get an erection, things like that. Okay, so since if you have no testosterone in your body but you have nandrolone in your body instead, Deca, that same enzyme 5-alpha reductase interacts with the nandrolone, and it is able to convert that nandrolone into a more potent version that can still act in the penis and in the brain, called dihydronandrolone. So it's not nearly as potent as dihydrotestosterone, but if you have high levels of nandrolone, so then you can get enough of that dihydronandrolone that you can still get that full hormonal function in your body. So if a normal person was taking 250 milligrams, of testosterone per week, they would be able to get the full hormonal benefits and having their hormonal system being stimulated, like an androgen replacement therapy benefit from that. Okay, but in order to equal that with nandrolone, you have to take a higher dosage of nandrolone, because you got to have that metabolite of nandrolone that does the effects that stimulate your hormonal system in order to replace the not having dihydrotestosterone in your body, because you're not going to have any dihydrotestosterone, the brain chemical, in your body if you're not taking testosterone, you're just taking Deca. So since dihydronandrolone is much weaker than dihydrotestosterone, you got to take more of it in order to get a similar effect. So for somebody that was taking Deca only and wanting to still have a good functioning sex drive and stuff like that, they got to be taking 800 milligrams per week. An absolute minimum of 600 milligrams per week, an absolute minimum, somewhere between 600 milligrams, up to 1,000 milligrams of nandrolone per week in order to get enough of that hormone in them to stimulate their hormonal system enough to be, normal, to have androgen replacement or testosterone replacement therapy, hormone replacement therapy effect in their body, coming from the Deca nandrolone. And with Deca, even for guys that are prone to hair loss, it generally doesn't cause hair loss. Deca and Anavar, if you're somebody who's super worried about taking steroids and hair loss, or if you've taken steroids and gotten hair loss and that you're really afraid of it or something, taking Deca and Anavar and not taking any other steroids is your best bet to keep that at bay, and deal with that. So yeah, you can do that. Jorge asks, someone told me to drop Tren and take only Masteron pre-contest. Your thoughts? Yeah, I don't think that's a good idea. And so the reason why is because, I've experimented with this myself. I've experimented with, only running Masteron, only running Masteron and Winstrol, only running Masteron, Winstrol, and Proviron. And let me tell you, okay, for one thing, your sex drive goes bye-bye, bye-bye, as soon as you take out that estrogenic component from your cycle, okay? So if you have no testosterone in there,
and you are on Masteron, normally Masteron increases your sex drive a lot, okay? But if you take out the testosterone and then you have no more estrogen, so you get no more estrogen in your brain because your brain needs estrogen to function correctly, bye-bye, sex drive, bye-bye. So that's one thing, okay, with Masteron. And the other thing with Masteron is that it provides zero muscle fullness, okay? Zero. It actually, taking Masteron kind of reduces muscle fullness a little bit. It provides a very lean, athletic, dense, hard look, okay? Very dense, very hard, but kind of a sucking in look to the muscles, okay? And so to have any kind of fullness at all on Masteron, you have to have something that loads glycogen into the muscle in addition to that, or else you will look so damn flat on Masteron only, or Masteron and Winstrol only. You'll look very dense and hard, but you will have no like 3D pop or roundness to your muscle, no fullness at all. You'll look very sucked down and flat and, kind of natural looking. Like as far as, not being 3D and, not having that round shape to your muscles, having more of a lean, long, flat, athletic look to your muscles instead. That's what's going to happen if you take out Trenbolone and if you're only using Trenbolone and Masteron pre-contest. Because, what a lot of people do pre-contest is they use testosterone, Trenbolone, and Masteron together. And then the last 3 weeks before the contest, they drop out the testosterone and just go into the contest on Trenbolone, Masteron, and a lot of times Winstrol together. And that, that actually provides a decent look. The Trenbolone keeps the glycogen storage in the muscle high enough that, there's still some 3D roundness and pop, but then there's no water retention at all from having any testosterone in there. So they get the combination of having that lean, dry, hard, suck down look while still having some muscle fullness with the Trenbolone in there. But if you do take out the Trenbolone and only go on the Masteron, let me tell you, you should try it just so you can experience this. You should try it and see what happens because, you get so flat. It's a very lean, athletic look. People will think you came off cycle. That's what happens. People will think you look, they'll be like, whoa, you got a lot smaller here. Did you go off cycle? And you'll look real hard and sucked down, but you will look very flat, stringy, not 3D, not round. You could be natural, but you'll look very hard at the same time. Just don't do it. Just don't do it unless you want to. Don't do it pre-contest, okay? You can experiment with it before your contest, but it's not going to be a good thing if you do this pre-contest. You're not going to be happy with the result. Garrett asks, hey man, just recently discovered the podcast and I'm a huge fan. I've done 2 cycles of Tren and I'm about to jump on another stack but want to tone it down a little. How does one go about finding farm grade gear though? I have access to a few underground labs but listen to your podcast about your infection. Okay, so getting farm grade gear, I said that, after my leg infection, I said that, I couldn't inject myself anymore with underground lab gear because, it's Russian roulette. Are you going to get an infection if you use underground lab gear? Probably not. But could you get an infection like me if you use underground lab gear? Yeah, you're putting yourself at that risk. And every bodybuilder that's honest with themselves knows that, it's not probable, but it can happen. And it's kind of like Russian roulette, low probability Russian roulette, injecting stuff that's made by drug dealers into your body and, injecting that straight into your body through your body's defenses. And, bad things can happen, and they do happen. I'm not the only one who has had an infection from UGL gear, other people have too. So guys that are, worried about that and thinking like, oh, I need farm grade gear, obviously it comes, it can be diverted. People that, okay, I'm not even going to talk about that. Okay. There are hormone clinics in Florida. Okay, that are online. And, I even coach some guys that use, because, I do the 1 hour phone call consultations for you guys that listen to the podcast. And then I also do the daily WhatsApp text messaging coaching, where it's month to month. And some of the guys that I do the coaching with, they use farm grade gear, farm grade human growth hormone, and a farm grade testosterone, Deca. Even some of them have Winstrol and Anavar prescribed by these hormone replacement therapies, and Anadrol from Florida. And what they do is these clinics in Florida, some of them are anti-aging clinics or rejuvenation clinics. They have websites, and the doctor will do a Skype video chat with you and prescribe you the pharmaceutical grade gear over the internet, okay? After doing the Skype chat with you. So it's legal, okay? It's legal. It's not like sketchy or underground or not legit, okay? And then they mail you your gear, your hormone replacement stuff in the mail with the prescription with it, okay? So it comes to your door with a prescription from the doctor in the mail, okay? And then people say, but is it expensive? Yeah, of course it's expensive. Like, get real, okay? Like, people who say, oh, well, I can't do it if it's expensive. Okay, well, this is the thing, is that things like pharmaceutical grade human growth hormone, pharmaceutical grade gear, getting, higher dosages of testosterone and, other anabolic hormones prescribed to you by a doctor. These things aren't cheap. People expect these things to be cheap. And that's the reason why a lot of people do use UGLs, is because they're cheap and more accessible. But I think most people do have some way, if you get UGL gear, usually those guys do know of some way that they can get pharmaceutical grade gear, but it's, 2 to 3 times the price of the UGL gear. And so they're like, oh, well, I don't want to do that, or something like that. And I mean, then if you choose that you don't want to do that, then like I said, you're putting yourself at that risk, where you could have something happen to you, like what happened to me with my leg infection in Colombia. If you don't know what happened, just Google search Dan Bodybuilder in Thailand leg infection, and it will come up. And, is that going to happen to you if you use UGL gear? Probably not. Could it happen to you? Yeah, it could. You're taking that risk. It's probably not going to happen, but it could. So, that's why I decided, for me, I had that happen once. I got freaking burned, and I can't take any chances with that happening again. So what I said, because, obviously I had to sit down with myself and have a discussion with myself, like, yo, what caused you to almost lose your leg? And talk to myself and say, like, this cannot happen again. So how can I make, sure that this is not going to happen again? And for me, what I decided that I had to do for my life to take care of myself from now on is that I can't take any more injections of UGL gear. So for injections, I only use pharmaceutical grade gear now. And then, for tablets, I'm still okay with taking like a tablet with a UGL gear. So like an oral steroid, I'm okay with that. But as far as injections go, that's a complete no for me. That's what I had to do, the decision that I had to make for my life to ensure that that will never happen again. All right. Next question is from Jay, who asks, hey, Dan, fan of the podcast. I've been a natural bodybuilder for 8 years, successfully gained from 130 pounds and now at 205 pounds lean. Now, if I want to take it to next level, what steroid stack would be perfect to start with and why? Okay, I checked out a picture of this guy because he sent it, and he looks good too. So great job on that natural bodybuilding. Good job with that. So I'm just going to say, like, what is the steroid cycle that I recommend for beginners? So earlier we talked about Dave Palumbo. He recommends for a first beginner steroid cycle 1,000 milligrams of testosterone per week. I recommend less testosterone than that because testosterone can cause some troubleshooting issues, okay? So testosterone becomes a lot of other hormones in the body. It can become estrogen, it can become dihydrotestosterone, and then there's metabolites of those hormones, and it can have effects on other hormonal systems. So what I prefer to do is use a lower dosage of testosterone for a guy on a first cycle, and then use some other steroids in there that don't produce any other hormones other than just the hormone that you put into you. So if you take a lower dosage of testosterone, you can have less troubleshooting with estrogen levels or dihydrotestosterone levels or whatever to have to tinker around with than if you take a higher dosage. So for guys that are doing a first cycle and they ask me, like, what should I take? What I say to them is, I'd say 2 cc's of testosterone per week, 500 milligrams of testosterone per week, just because I think that less than that, it really doesn't provide like that wow or bang factor like at all that you're looking for, because people have expectations when they're going on steroids, and they're like, they have expectations of what's going to happen. And, if it's this really slow methodological gradual change that happens over months, that's not what they're really looking for, and they're usually pretty damn disappointed about it. So I recommend 500 milligrams of testosterone per week paired with an oral that doesn't have any estrogenic effects or doesn't have any severe side effects really. And so usually like plug and play orals where, for example, with testosterone or Trenbolone or Deca or even Equipoise, when you use those, you have to tinker around with anti-estrogen pills or anti-prolactin pills and be, tinkering around with these dosages of these other chemicals to control side effects and shit. But with something like Winstrol or Anavar or Dbol or Primobolan, you don't have to add anything in. They're just plug and play steroids, and there's no troubleshooting necessary. You just start taking it. You don't have to take anything else with it. You just start taking the roid, and it works, and it makes you look better. It makes you stronger, and it makes you grow muscle. So in order to, have that experience when you get on the gear where you're like, oh, wow, I'm impressed by this. Like, this is what I imagined would happen when I went on gear. Quickly gaining size, strength, muscle mass, and looking better. What's going to work good for that is starting out with about 500 milligrams of testosterone or so per week, and then taking something like 50 milligrams of Anavar or Winstrol or Dbol per day if you wanted to do an oral. And that's what I would recommend, is one of those three, Winstrol, Anavar, or Dbol, at around 50 milligrams per day, paired with 500 milligrams of testosterone. That is the beginner steroid cycle that I would recommend. But some people are like scared to death of orals, and I don't think that that's really necessary. But if that's you for some reason, then you pretty much got to shell out the extra money for Primobolan if you are looking for that same kind of thing where it's like plug and play with no side effects, and having that expectation where you're looking better, getting stronger, and getting bigger, and it will also be a little bit slower, obviously, to experience the gains if you use Primobolan in comparison to if you use an oral. So for those guys that are like dead set on not using an oral for their first steroid cycle, then it would be the same thing that I'd recommend. I'd recommend about 500 milligrams or so of testosterone per week, and I'd recommend like 600 milligrams of Primobolan per week with that. So that would be a shot of testosterone twice per week and a full 3 cc shot of Primobolan twice per week. And I mean, those would be easy cycles to do. There's not going to be a lot of side effects you have to deal with. You can pretty much just take those roids and be good to go. With the testosterone, you're going to have to probably take a Arimidex or Exemestane, a couple pills per week, but that's it. And other than that, you can just be on the cycle, enjoy the gains, not have side effects, not have any kind of like fucked up sex drive or anything like that, and just enjoy what you're doing. So that's what I recommend for a first beginner cycle. The next question is from Grant, who asks, "Hi, first off, love the podcast. Bought your ebook, Ultimate Guide to Roids. Amazing depth of knowledge put into both. Starting my first cycle of 250 milligrams testananthate 12 weeks, going to use Aromacin exemestane as anti-estrogen, and wanted to use HCG throughout. What dosage HCG would you recommend I use per week? Also, could you recommend which main blood work I should get checked for this cycle? Thanks in advance." All right, so with 250 milligrams testosterone per week, you're not going to have health effects, like negative health effects from that. That is a dosage that, doctors prescribe regularly for testosterone replacement therapy. And that means for guys that have no testosterone, getting them up to normal testosterone levels. For most guys that take 250 milligrams per week of testosterone, that'll get them a little bit above normal testosterone levels. Like it'll get them around 1,000 nanograms per deciliter, or 1,000, somewhere between 1,000 to 1,500 nanograms per deciliter, whereas the normal range is more like 500 to 900 nanograms per deciliter, or 600 to 900 or so for normal, good testosterone levels in normal men who are not over 40 years old. Those are the normal numbers, so it'll get you a little bit on the higher end of the spectrum, but some guys it won't. Some guys will get them still in that normal, completely normal spectrum. It depends on how your body metabolizes testosterone, how effective your body is at getting rid of the testosterone drug once it's in your body, how high your blood levels will get. So as far as like blood work and stuff like that, like you can definitely get your blood work checked, and if you take steroids and you want to get your blood work checked, you should get a full regular health panel. So if you go on to a place like private web or private med labs, private MD labs, I think is what it's called, .com. You can order, if you don't have insurance or you don't want to do it through your doctor, you can just do it through them. And they have a program where you can go to some kind of lab that they contract with. And if you live in major cities and you don't live in New York, because I think it's banned in New York, you can go there, take a little blood test, and then they send the info to the website. I think it's called Private MD Labs. And then they post your blood test results, and you can view them online, and that's that. And generally what you want to do when you are on steroids is you want to get a full health panel. Some guys, they want to check their testosterone levels when they're on cycle, and that's totally reasonable too, and a good thing to do, to see if your gear's legit, like if you're wondering, testing your total testosterone levels. But if you're looking at it for health, then you just need to get the general health panel that shows your liver enzymes, your cholesterol, your blood lipids, your kidney function, etc. Shows all the normal stuff, and you can just see how the organs of your body are running, and mostly everything should be in the normal range. Some things that might be a little bit off sometimes is liver enzymes can be a little bit high, and that can be from taking oral steroids, or it can just be from working out, because working out breaks down tissue and it makes your liver enzymes go a little bit high sometimes. And then the other thing is cholesterol can get raised a little bit from being on testosterone, and also from being on oral steroids, and then oral steroids also can affect your blood lipids as well. So those are the testing parameters that usually get it's more common to see those get out of range from taking steroids. Another thing that gets out of range a little bit is hematocrit, which is the amount of red blood cells in your blood, like the density of red blood cells in your blood. So hemoglobin means like the total amount of volume of your blood with the red blood cells in it. And then the hematocrit is just like how much red blood cells you have. And so those numbers are both related, and either of them can be good for looking at, do I have too many red blood cells? If you have high hemoglobin, or if you have high hematocrit, those can both be accurate tests for showing, if you have too many red blood cells in your blood. And the way that you get rid of that, though, if you get that, is you go give blood. You donate blood. You get the blood out of your body, and that thins out your blood again and gets rid of some of those extra red blood cells. But talking about high red blood cell count is that a lot of athletes try to get high red blood cell count. That's why you hear about people training at high altitudes and then coming down and competing at low altitudes. It's because at high altitudes there's less oxygen, so the body responds by producing more red blood cells, and they come back down to normal altitude and they have extra red blood cells, which means they have more oxygen being able to flow through their body, fuel their cardiovascular system, and fuel their muscles, so they're at an advantage. Another thing that people, the athletes have been known to do is to, draw their blood and take, a bag of blood, of their own blood, and then put it in the fridge and keep it there for months. And then when it's time for the competition, their body has regenerated and has a normal blood again, but now they reinsert that blood that they took out, months earlier, and they reinsert it into their body and plug it back into their bloodstream. So now they have extra red blood cells again. So then they're able to do a better athletic performance. So when you're talking about slightly raised hematocrit or slightly raised red blood cell levels, it's something that athletes generally desire. So as long as it's not, out of, pretty high out of range, or, like definitely out of range, it's not such a bad issue. Okay. I give blood once every 3 months, and I just leave it at that. Usually, just to let you know, usually I am at the top of the normal range for hematocrit and hemoglobin. Like, I'm right at the point. That's my general thing. With giving blood once every 3 months, that's what I normally do. And when I go in and get my hematocrit and hemoglobin tested, my numbers are right at the top of the normal range, like bordering on what would be too high. So that's me. Okay, next question is from Mike. Can you talk about how the use of Kratom can benefit someone on cycle? I, for one, have been running 1.5 grams of test, and Kratom has really helped me stabilize my mood. Also, a fast strain pre-workout feels amazing. What are your thoughts? Yeah, Kratom is an incredible pre-workout drug for bodybuilding. So, this is not a good thing, but back in the 90s, people were using injectable Vicodin called Nubain as a pre-workout. They said, it lowers cortisol, so it's good. But, then everybody got addicted to Nubain because it's injectable Vicodin, and they were taking it intravenously. And so people were walking around with fanny packs with Vicodin bottles and syringes inside. Not a good thing, okay? But so what Kratom is there's different kind of opiate receptors in your body. Kratom is a plant that grows in Southeast Asia, and the leaves are ground up into a powder, and then you eat the powder, okay? And there are different kind of opiate receptors in the body. There's the kind of opiate receptors that morphine and its analogs, such as Vicodin, can stimulate. And then there's other kind of opiate receptors in your body. And the kind of opiate receptors that Kratom stimulates are the ones that are not the same kind, primarily not the same kind that morphine and Vicodin stimulate, okay? So these receptors that the Kratom stimulates, it doesn't have those same kind of like real addictive effects, and it also doesn't suppress your breathing. So that's definitely one of the main dangerous effects of things like, morphine or heroin or, Vicodin is, one, the addiction potential, and then two, depressing your breathing and then dying from having a cardiovascular or like collapse where, you stop breathing. But with the Kratom, that doesn't happen. It doesn't suppress your breathing. And then also, it does have some addictive properties to it. It's about as addictive as coffee is. If you're a black coffee drinker, you know that's addictive. I mean, I've been addicted to coffee. I've definitely been addicted to coffee, where it's like I can't function without it. If you can't function without something, if you can't function without it normally, then yeah, your body's got an addiction to that substance. It has to have that chemical in order to be normal. So that's happened to me with Kratom too. Where, I would be using Kratom every day, 2 or 3 times a day at around 5 to 10 grams per dosage. And it's an incredible antidepressant. And it really creates a great optimistic feeling It makes you feel very optimistic, and you really see a light at the end of the tunnel, and it's incredible for your mood. But if I wanted to stop taking it, I would have to stop taking it, and then for the next 1.5 or 2 days, I really wouldn't feel too great. I'd feel kind of like I had a cold. I wouldn't feel hot, that's for sure. And if you've tried to stop drinking coffee after you've been drinking coffee all throughout the day, every day like that. So, like I said, I was taking Kratom, 2 or 3 times a day, every day. That's a similar way to a lot of people drink, coffee 2 or 3 times a day, every day. And when you want to stop drinking coffee and you've been doing that, and the same thing when you've been taking Kratom and you want to stop doing that, for the next about 2 days, you don't feel too good. It's not like some kind of crazy thing where you're like mentally addicted and shit like that. I mean, I don't even think it's mentally addictive. Kratom, I don't think it's as mentally addictive as even like marijuana is, because it doesn't really. It's not an escape. It's definitely not an escape. So it makes you feel certain ways. It can make you feel good, but it doesn't change your state of consciousness. So like something like getting drunk, or smoking even weed, or taking some other kind of like drugs can change your state of consciousness and be like an escape from your normal life and the things that stress you out and stuff like that. But Kratom doesn't change your state of consciousness. You're still exactly in reality and still exactly in that same zone. You're not in this different state of mind. You're in your normal state of mind. You just feel better. You have more optimism. You have more motivation. And it's like an antidepressant. And also it can make your body like have a good feeling to your body, take away aches and pains, stuff like that. And then if you use it as a pre-workout and go to the gym, it can really make you have an amazing workout because it reduces the amount of pain that you can feel. So you can just like go longer and harder. And also you just don't get tired. You just cannot feel the fact that you get tired or worn out in the gym. So you can basically work out for 2 or 3 hours at high intensity, and not feel tired, feel amazing, feel great doing that. Yeah. Yeah, it's an incredible pre-workout, and it's a really great thing. I don't use Kratom anymore. The last time I used Kratom was about 6 months ago. I started using it because I got prescribed. I had a chronic injury, like a repetitive motion injury in my arms, and this was years ago. And the doctor prescribed me Tramadol. He prescribed me Tramadol to be using every day to deal with that, and I didn't want to take that every day. And so then I, started taking things into my own hands, found out about Kratom, and I used that instead, and it worked, better than the Tramadol for managing my pain. And, it just worked better for me, and it was something natural. It was a plant that I ate, plant powder that I ate rather than a pharmaceutical drug, and I preferred it. So that's how I started using Kratom. And now, like, it's not legal in Thailand for one thing, so that's one reason why I never use it in Thailand. But when I go back to America, I like to have a Kratom every, maybe once every 3 weeks or so. I go for months sometimes without taking it ever, but it's definitely nice to take a Kratom sometimes. Take 5 to 10 grams of Kratom powder, eat it, and yeah, it's good. I have a great day on that day, for sure. Or if I felt low or something, or for some reason on that day, and I took the Kratom, then I'd feel incredible that day instead. So that's Kratom. All right. The next question is from Natty P, who says, high dose Anavar blast, say 8 weeks at 100 milligrams every day over a cruise dose of testosterone. I like Anavar because it makes me feel good and it just kind of works steadily. Am I wrong in thinking more equals better? Thanks. Love the podcast. Yeah, 100 milligrams per day of Anavar is a great dosage. So Anavar pretty much becomes effective around 40 milligrams per day. That's when you start to feel it. And I'm talking pharmaceutical grade Anavar. I know that people talk about, like, back in the old days, we took 10 milligrams of Anavar per day or 20 milligrams of Anavar per day. Like, they're talking that down. They didn't use low dosages in the golden era. I mean, I can tell you that. I don't want to get into it too much about discussing exactly what they were using, because they were abusing stuff just like the guys today abuse stuff, okay? And we don't need to always be talking about the most, insane abuse and shit that, pro heavyweight bodybuilders do. It's just unnecessary to be like constantly hammering you guys with that. We talk about that on the show enough, that people use high dosages. And so that by now, okay? So when people talk about, using 20 milligrams per day of Anavar and being like, yeah, I'm a pro bodybuilder or something, that's not accurate, okay? It's just not accurate. If you've used ROIDS before and you know what ROIDS do, like, you use your common sense and see that that's not realistic. So for Anavar to start being perceptible and to start being like, yeah, I definitely notice the effects. It's not like maybe I notice it, but I notice the effects. 40 milligrams per day is pretty much the minimum dosage that you're going to get that kind of effect from. And once you get up to like 60 milligrams per day, it's like, yeah, I'm getting a good effect from this. And then at 100 milligrams per day, I'm getting a great effect from this. I'm getting a great effect. So when you talk about, are you wrong in thinking more is better with Anavar? No, absolutely not. 100 milligrams per day is a fantastic dosage for Anavar. Some people use Trenbolone at 100 milligrams per day. Is that weird? Or 50 milligrams per day of Trenbolone, so 350 milligrams per week, or 700 milligrams per week of Trenbolone. Those are not unusual dosages at all. Or, even taking like 1,000 milligrams of some kind of hormone, 1,000 milligrams of Test, or Primobolan, or Equipoise. These things are not that abnormal. So sometimes people are worried about toxicity from oral steroids, and that's true. Oral steroids can give some toxicity, some total body toxicity, and some liver toxicity. But Anavar is, much less toxic than basically any other oral steroid. And where other oral steroids have been shown, at high dosages and prolonged use to, occasionally in somebody, especially if they have some kind of pre-existing liver condition, but also sometimes, occasionally if they don't, they can have, some major liver problems, or, occasionally even there's been liver failure reported from people, abusing oral steroids. So that does happen, but not with Anavar. Anavar has been shown to raise liver enzymes a bit on occasion, but there's never been any liver failure reported from Anavar. And actually, one of the prescription uses that the doctor in America will prescribe Anavar for is for people who have alcohol-induced fatty liver failure, okay? They can prescribe Anavar. This is a reason they prescribe Anavar, is to help those people recover their livers, okay? So just going to say, Anavar isn't quite like those other oral anabolic steroids. Yes, they all are, the other oral anabolic steroids are liver toxic because they reduce, or they resist breakdown in the liver because they have a molecule called 17-alpha alkylation added to the hormone molecule, and that 17-alpha alkylation molecule makes it be able to resist breakdown in the liver, and it causes liver stress to happen. So Anavar actually has that too. It also has that 17-alpha alkylation, but for some reason, and doctors and scientists don't know why, they just notice from studying that it doesn't cause the same amount of liver stress as the other oral steroids do. It's far, far less than the other ones. So, yeah, 100 milligrams Anavar per day. Fantastic dosage of Anavar. The next question is from Lou. He says, I want to look like models on Instagram, people like Jeff Seid or Carlton Loth. How possible? Okay, so these guys take way ranging dosages of performance enhancing drugs. You can't really categorize them all as being taking one thing. So some of these guys take, high dosages of Tren, and others of them take lower dosages, or some of them don't take Tren and rely on other stuff. So you can't say like this is what they take, but I can tell you, generally what these guys use, and what they use is they use nutrient partitioning agents, and they use muscle hardener compounds. So the hormones that are popular with them are Trenbolone, Anavar, Winstrol, Masteron. Those are the popular hormones that they use, that those guys like to use. Most of them use testosterone propionate. It holds less water than long-acting testosterone. Helps you look more ripped, and it's basically more effective as well, at the same dosage as a longer dose testosterone. And then a lot of them use pharmaceutical grade human growth hormone. So pharmaceutical grade human growth hormone, a lot of people say like growth hormone has water retention, but if you have pharmaceutical grade growth hormone, not very much, not really. And especially if you're not running it in a super high dosage. If you're running it at a dosage, 5 IUs or below, not really, not much water retention there. And so growth hormone directly burns fat. It makes it so that you can eat food and not store it as fat. A lot of these guys also use thyroid hormones like T4 and T3, and they use Clenbuterol. They also use metformin because metformin is like a filter. And so when you take metformin, 1,000 milligrams to 2,000 milligrams per day, it stops about 30% of the fats and carbohydrates that you eat from being absorbed. And instead, they just go straight through you and you shit them out. So it can be like a filter for some of the unclean food that you see these guys eat. If you see these guys like bragging and showing off by like eating pizza, eating ice cream, stuff like that, and doing it frequently and saying like, look at my body that I can maintain, For those guys, having a, increasing their metabolic rate, their basal metabolic rate, by taking thyroid hormones, and then, having a filter on their food, that filters some of the energy out and just makes it go straight through them, and they can shit it out by taking metformin, and then taking human growth hormone, which blocks fat cells from being able to intake energy and promotes muscle cells taking them instead, and then also directly burns fat off of your stomach area. Those are things that help with that. And then also Trenbolone, things that, it's definitely also blocks uptake of energy by fat cells, and it directly burns fat and makes your muscles look harder and shit like that. So yeah, if I was going to give like a basic cycle that would work, that would just be like an average cycle for these guys that are like, if you want to have that Jeff Seid body, that Carlton Loth body, that Z's body. Okay. The first thing though, that I gotta put out this disclaimer here. A lot of these guys are just born genetically lean. They're these guys that, when they were 8 years old, they had an 8-pack. Yeah. You saw these guys growing up, and you saw them in high school, and even in college a little bit. They're these guys that they just don't have fat on their body. They're skinny. They're not muscular. But they normally have that wide clavicle where, the clavicle, the area like their collarbone and their shoulders are wide, and then they have the smaller waist, and they're just born, lean. They've just always had an 8-pack or a 6-pack, and they were born that way. Never could gain fat, never could gain muscle. And then they go on steroids, and that decreases the amount of thyroid hormone that they naturally produce. And, then they're able to gain some weight, and put on some muscle. So that's what a lot of these guys are. They go on a little bit of tren, they go on a little bit of growth hormone, and they go on a little bit of testopropionate, and, they use some Clenbuterol sometimes, and then a lot of times they don't even have a big appetite either, so they have a good time staying lean, not being too muscular, but then having a really hard, ripped look. And that's how they get that look. That's how a lot of these guys are. So this is the disclaimer before I tell you a cycle of like how you can, progress towards that. But, a lot of these guys genetically, they're coming from that starting point. And so then they just throw in some tren, some Winstrol, some growth hormone, and, doing that, some Clenbuterol, having a low appetite, and doing that with their genetics of already being lean. Now they add some muscle thickness, and, they look really good. And that's that. But if that's not you, then the best way to approximate that look
would be raising your basal metabolic rate by taking thyroid hormones, using the filter to make it so that you don't absorb as much of your food that you eat, because these guys aren't that big. So taking 2,000 milligrams of metformin per day, taking 25 micrograms of T3 thyroid hormone per day, taking 100 milligrams of Trenbolone acetate every other day, so around 350 milligrams per week of Trenbolone acetate, same dosage of testosterone propionate, and taking about 4 IUs or even just 2 IUs of farm-grade human growth hormone per day. Then doing some Clenbuterol sometimes with cardio. Not lifting too heavy in the gym, but doing a lot of workouts that are like non-stop weight training with lighter weights, but you just don't ever stop training. You don't take rest breaks. You burn a lot of calories in the gym. And yeah, obviously do cardio. Those are the ways that you can most approximate that look if that's not naturally how you are. All right. Final question for today is from Dan. He says, I'm getting older, 46, been training a long time, never taken a cycle. As a natural, I've got a good amount of muscle, but it's getting harder to lose weight. What would you take as a first cycle with my metrics, and how long to get a good muscular, lean build? Okay. So if you're natural, definitely get on some testosterone. You're 46 and you're looking for a boost and you're looking to do your first cycle. So definitely get on some testosterone. You could just go to your doctor, and get your base testosterone, because that will be very easy for you to do. Go to the doctor, get them to prescribe you, your pharmaceutical grade testosterone, so you don't have to worry about UGL bullshit testosterone. That, it's probably fine if you do use that, but it's better not to. It's always better to use pharmaceutical grades. And since you're approaching middle age, this is definitely a time that you could get that without much difficulty. So I advise that. Get on the testosterone. And then, like I said earlier about a first cycle to recommend, Anavar is really great, and it's really low side effects. So Anavar, Turinabol, or Winstrol, those are all drugs that make you harder, stronger, and look better, and grow muscle. And they do it fast, right away. So those are definitely good ones. And you can just take, 50 milligrams per day of any of those. I would probably prefer Anavar, especially if I was in my 40s. That's what I would do. Because, Anavar is definitely the most healthy one of those choices. And I would be doing, like I was talking about with these guys that were wanting to do this lean Instagram model look, like Jeff Seid or whatever. A lot of these guys, the way that they're training in the gym is they're burning a lot of calories. So when you go to the gym and you are just lifting heavy weights and, you're resting, and then you go and, lift another weight set for, it lasts 20 seconds, and then you rest for another 3 minutes and do that, for an hour, you've exercised for like a grand total of like 3.5, 5 minutes by the time your hour workout is up. And it really doesn't burn much energy at all. And if you're not physically active in the day other than that, like, you really don't have a very high caloric need at all. So, like, a lot of guys that wonder, how come I'm not burning more calories? How come I can't eat more food without getting fat? A lot of it is because, other than that weightlifting with a lot of resting in between, they're not really getting any other physical activity during the day. So would definitely recommend, getting on the TRT, taking some Anavar, and changing your workouts to doing non-stop weightlifting, basically. Like, you stop the set, like you're doing some bench press, and, as soon as you finish that bench press set, you're doing a little bit of pull-ups, and then, you're doing a little bit of dumbbell rows, and then you go back to the bench press, and, you've only rested, maybe 15 seconds between each of those exercises, and you basically do that for an hour in the gym. So you're basically constantly moving, working in the gym without rest. And that's the best way to get your training to be building more of that lean athletic look, rather than a more softer, bigger look. If you would like your questions to be answered on the Steroids podcast, go to steroidspodcast.com and leave a comment with your questions, or email or private message steroidspodcast@gmail.com or steroidspodcast on Instagram. Until next time.